Welcome to WTF is Web3, where we untangle the uncertainties of Web3 technologies. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information, giveaways, and ways to stay in touch. You're also going to want to make sure that you're subscribed to our podcast, our YouTube channel, and our private group so you don't miss out on exclusive content, freebies, and much more. If this episode seems like it was stripped out of a longer conversation, that's because it was. This is what we call a shallow dip, because it's basically the opposite of a deep dive, where we're going to give you a brief explanation of a concept, a term, or a topic that we just felt you would dig without having to listen to an entire episode. However, if you do want to listen to the entire episode, I invite you to check out the show notes, because that will get you to that longer episode and you can hear everything in context of the original conversation. Now that we've got that explanation out of the way, let's jump into the episode.
Well, and so that's sort of my next question with this, because we just mentioned that you have all these different metaverses that exist right now.
I like that.
They're all sort of fragmented, but a big aspect, and I bring up that it's the primary aspect of Web3, and this is, I think, where you and I kind of disagree, is this decentralized component. Mm-hmm. Where you have the ability for individuals to take control. And that's really what makes that next leap out of Web 2. You no longer have these like walled gardens or these big organizations are in control. But with the metaverse, that's exactly what we have. We have these big companies starting their own universes, and they essentially control the keys to it. I know that was a huge pushback that a lot of people had with Facebook rebranding as metaverse, that now you would have Facebook in control of the metaverse, something that a lot of people in this space were just bent over thinking that Mark Zuckerberg could be calling the shots in this. So it's a concern that I think I have, but also why I'm not exactly sure if I would consider this a Web3 application. Now, like you mentioned, a lot of these things you can bring in and they're going to be used by the metaverse. You're going to have digital native everything, basically, which lends itself to all these tools. Like, we're going to get into NFTs and talk a little bit more about them as we go forward in our conversations, get a little more into cryptocurrencies. But like, it's not built on the blockchain. We talked a little bit about the blockchain last time. That's not like what the metaverse is built on. There's no smart contracts. And you have some of these other companies like really competing, like big, like well-known conglomerates. Microsoft just bought what was it, Activision Blizzard? Yes. Ostensibly to bolster this world of theirs, but they have really in-depth business tools which make a lot of sense utilizing a metaverse. But again, they're a huge company. Epic Games, so you're talking about games. Fortnite. Mm-hmm. Fortnite's basically a metaverse, and I was reading some reports that they're looking to really jump in and get some more funding and grow a metaverse universe around Fortnite. And then a lot of maybe device companies could be jumping on board, like Apple. Apple's really well positioned for this with their ecosystem. But again, that's a huge pushback for their closed ecosystem, for their apps, mm-hmm. that you don't have this ability to have control. And so I don't know, what's your take on that, and how is it going to actually have this freedom for the people by the people, like you just mentioned?
I would say that there are projects that their intent, their expressed intent is to go the for the people by the people decentralized route. However, in the beginning of anything that wants to be decentralized, you need it to be built, and that's going to take, the more complex it is, the longer it's going to take. For instance, a lot of people think they associate every cryptocurrency with decentralization, and that's not true. The Ethereum, the second largest cryptocurrency, is not decentralized. They've got a CEO. That guy has control. They've done edits to the blockchain. They've gone back on certain things. There is someone who has control. They are also not infinitely finite. At Vitalik's discretion, they can create more Ethereum. Whereas Bitcoin is decentralized in that Satoshi Nakamoto is not in control of anything. He's a ghost. He disappeared. Actually, turns out he's down here in Miami. He's a Caucasian guy, and we can get into that in another.
What does that matter, Casey?
because Satoshi Nakamoto, everyone thought he was Japanese. It's a Japanese name, but
You can
his
be
name is
whatever you
not
want to be, Casey.
Satoshi Nakamoto. That was one of his not a nom de plume. What would that be? A pseudonym. But there, once these projects are at the level where they can, walk for themselves, like I know Earth 2, that's their intent. They've already put in and Sandbox, I believe, and I think Decentraland, and they are implementing blockchain. Like the properties that you buy, they all have a unique identifier which correlates with a blockchain registry. There are smart contract foundations that would dictate how much you get with the land income tax, where you get that little dividend when people buy in, and all sorts of other things. And there's stuff that like I can't even see. They have confirmed that they are going to have their own cryptocurrency. They also have this thing called Essence. And the way I would describe it is it's not a currency. It's going to behave very much like a currency, but it's basically like a substitution for work or energy. So you can harness and collect Essence, and then when you have resources, you use Essence to turn these resources into something else. You have a bunch of wood. Now I'm going to use the wood that I have in the Essence, and it'll be consumed, and I'll turn it into a log cabin. And then they also have e-dollars. They will have at least a tethered cryptocurrency that will be a stable coin. And it looks like it's going to be 1-to-1 with the US dollar, and possibly even another currency that might fluctuate. I don't know if that'd be towards their advantage or not, but I think that right now it's just so early that a lot of these projects aren't even, they're still arguably in their infancy. But I do see it being a necessity because of the reasons that you express. Everyone has the concerns with Metaverse. As those projects start being exposed for nefarious things, or things that maybe not nefarious, just things that make people feel uncomfortable, there will be that desire for something that is decentralized. Same thing with social media. We are now seeing a lot of social media projects that are coming out with like the banner, the drum they're beating is we're decentralized. There's no censorship. We're not going to censorship. That was a weird word to bite my tongue on. We're not going to collect your data, like all this stuff. As it becomes more of a problem, not something that we're like, it's going to be creepy in 10 years when they're able to do this. It's like, no, they've been doing this for 20 years. Now it's in the front of our minds.
I don't really know if they're saying they're not decentralized.
Some of the
or they're not centralized. Sorry, if they're not centralized.
Some of the new ones. There's one I mentioned to you the other day. BBS. Their whole thing is there's no censorship. It's going to be, they build the platform and they put it out there, and you can make your own platform, and it's like a Reddit with cryptocurrency and blockchain and NFTs all woven in on it. Not going to get into that. That'll be another episode. But their whole thing is we're decentralized. I think a lot of these, especially with all the political stuff and all the COVID stuff with false information and fact checkers and all that, people want something that's just decentralized. They want to, people are, the Joe Rogan thing where he's like, Joe Rogan's position, you mentioned somebody else where they basically have a similar quote where it's, to combat misinformation, you need more information, not to start censoring people, because it becomes a slippery slope when who decides.
Okay. Yeah. And so I was referring to David Sachs. And if any of you guys are not familiar with the All In podcast, fabulous podcast, and they actually talk about Meta quite a bit and some of the concerns that we bring up.
You should have Dave come by, drop him hit him up on Getter.
Yeah. He's a Miami guy.
All right, that is going to wrap it up for this shallow dip. But if you want more information and more conversation, I invite you to check out the episode notes and our channel, because not only can you listen to the entire conversation from which this clip was stripped, but there's also going to be more episodes that do a deeper dive on this specific topic. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to make sure you don't forget to check out the information and the links in the show notes. Some of that stuff is going to get you into freebies and raffles and contests and all sorts of other promotions. But also, we've got a private group dedicated to our listeners and our followers. We would love to see you there, love to see you collaborate, join, and get exclusive content that we are only distributing through these other means. Speaking of distributing through other means, I want to make sure that you're also subscribed to our podcast, our YouTube channel, and again, join that private group so you know everything that we know as soon as we know it.